Residents, citizens, stewards of Provo City. From the bottom of this time, we're asking our minds to be clear of this, to make no decisions and discussions for the best interest of the residents of Provo. From the bottom of this time, we ask mostly the responders to as well as our service members and we know that also especially glad for them to be say these things come to the best stuff. We appreciate y'all being here. I just want to start by saying I really appreciate our contribution. And we just do that recognition. All of you guys are going for it. This is not the agenda item. I believe this was requested by someone I knew. Discussion on the direction of things. Yeah, that was actually something that I submitted just because I thought that's how long I need to push over. I've actually looked at a lot of case studies in cities around the country where you've got adversarial, let's say, or maybe not driving in the same direction. So, and I, on my part, I recommend the body and interview and find out, make sure things are what are zoning and ordinances and things like that. So it seems like there are a lot of other commissions around the country who don't take that community role as their job. And they're very considerate to me. And one percent of the recommendations are not taken or returned. And I thought, you don't want to be there. You don't actually don't need to read it. But I just wanted to make sure that if the council has any direction to go with or not with planning department, it would be nice to know so that we have all, at least can know how interest will receive and then give the recommendations that not necessarily be on every time, but more in the same ballpark as what the council and staff members have in mind in the city. So I don't expect there to be any massive impact. Okay, appreciate that background. In terms of Reynolds, help on this, because one question I had or come up earlier this morning is our commission has some stuff where we kind of need to be careful about not doing too much. Also, so, any suggestions as to how we can proceed?
Well, I would just say I appreciated how Mr. Smith presented that because I think he made clear that the request is coming from, at least from his perspective, he still has to understand that the council is thinking not that he's asking for direction. Because I think you're right that the commission and the council are separate legal bodies. The council has some authority who serves on the commission. As far as the subcommittee how it includes, but otherwise, independent and I think what I heard him say is you can tell him you can tell him right now what you think and the commission can say, okay, we're gonna go that. I mean, I think they can, so, but I think it's important to clarify that. When you ask questions, I think that the focus of the discussion should be to the extent council members want to present their views on development in the city, share that information.
I think a good example of that would be some of the things the planning commission and staff has been bringing to them and spending time on. Because we're talking about development on the west side. And I know that's a high priority for the council. We're quickly getting into the area of needing some sort of policy directions, not that specific policies that the council would tell the planning commission, these are the policies we want, but whether you want them to spend time, because they have limited time and resources to be able to focus on that. So one of them is the west side of priority for the council, not necessarily what the results can do, but looking at the west side, yes, that's a high priority. Yeah, yes, you know, how do we balance with agriculture, with open space, with population increase and those types of things, housing needs in the city, those types of issues, and then they can spend more time. The other area that they can spend a lot of time on, or recently we've had some meetings dealing with infrastructure and how it relates to development, especially building up on the hillside, up on the east side, and where that interplays with need for the ability of the city to provide water, sewer, those types of things. You know, how far up the hill should we really develop as a city? Should we have some sort of outer boundary? Should we not? You know, all of those types of issues. And then I know Bill's got a few other of these types of issues that would be good to know if these are important issues to the council. And if so, in what format, what type of time frame, these types of recommendations or policy questions ought to come back to the council. Is that
interesting to have some of the points of contention in this other case studies I've read on, but this one has street widths and building heights. Where they were very high on resignation on higher buildings around the streets. The council wanted to go to work and buildings and things like that. So really, yeah, but so,
I appreciate that. One is
what the boundaries are between coordination. But I think, if anything, we as a council, as a city, and I imagine council has a big portion of that, is I think we need to better communicate what we're looking for. And maybe that's not directly to the planning commission, but I think we need to finish up that Southwest Master Plan. We need to communicate with developers and other stakeholders so that they know, what the city, if that's through the council or whatever, is looking for, so they know that where to spend their time and money on building plans. They know, oh, well, that's not what I'm looking to develop, so I'll go elsewhere. Or, hey, I really want to do this, and it happens to be what the city wants, but we just haven't communicated that because all of our general plan is not in sync with what the council or what the city wants. So, I'd like to have the city, whether that's through the council or however, communicate clearly what we're looking for, and I think that would hopefully help the planning commission.
I'll just add to that, if I may, that planning commission generally hears from the general public around a polarized issue. They come to a meeting because there's something they're concerned about, either they're supporting it, proposing it, and you all hear from your constituents on a regular basis. So you have more of a balanced sense of what the community is looking for through your constituents. So I think it's important for us to get your perspective on those things and not just hear when we're hearing a polarized issue, at a commission hearing.
You're pretty polarized voices.
I think we're subject to the same situation.
So one area that we need policy direction on is that we've heard recently a vocal group asking for preservation of ag land, right? You could say that the 2010 general plan update settled that issue when it said the entire west side is designated R, residential, and it can develop up to 4 units to the acre. So as we look at development requests, the staff has to go off of those existing plans and policies. If those plans and policies should change because of different attitudes in the public and different attitudes in the council, we need to get moving towards making those changes. Otherwise, it keeps property owners and developers in limbo. Well, are you going by the plans that are adopted? Or are you guys thinking something new? It creates a difficult situation for those people who want to do something. And with every day that West Side Connector becomes closer to being opened, we're getting more and more pressure to develop the west side. You will be surprised to see what's coming down the pipeline.
From the high school.
And then from the high school, yeah, which certainly added development pressure on the west side. Things are on the cusp of changing.
So what I'm hearing you say is if we actually want some green space or ag space, now's the time to figure it out.
A year ago would have been better, but when the doors started to close, the doors started to close fast.
I think part of what Bill's saying is we thought we did figure it out in 2010, but there's a lot of pressure we're hearing a lot of pressure to revisit it. But as staff, we're kind of still marching to that 2010 mandate. And if people are starting to have a feel of, no, we really need to go back and revisit that issue and spend extra time on it and really reconsider it again, that's something we really need to know, because that will dramatically change how we approach as staff, and I think how the planning commission will approach those plans out there on the west side. Is that fair?
Yes. Yeah. I'm sorry, Mayor.
So Bill, what you were saying from the 2010 is the west side was all designated to be developed with really no provisions for significant open space or agriculture at all.
Right.
And I think we've moved past that, but it's not articulated in the plan.
Right, exactly. And that's fine, because the neighborhood plans, as we write those, we're supposed to augment the general plan, and if we change directions in neighborhood plans, that's fine. But we've been working on that west side plan for about 2 years now and feel like we've gotten to a place where we need some policy direction, because we have absolutely opposing views from your constituents.
So you asked about sentiment from constituents. I guess my thought on that, I feel like I'm hearing an increasing desire to do something in terms of agricultural preservation. And I think we made one of our priorities for the year looking at the west side plan, but I'm not at a point where I could articulate anything concrete as to what that would look like. I think we're still in the process on that.
And even then, I think I've heard some voices on the council that question agriculture there. So if I don't, even then, I'm not certain that there's consensus there. Love how you started out by saying, I did this because we didn't want to short discussion. Because I think on any of these topics, we could really dive deeply. So maybe by saying that, maybe I should just hold off on agriculture. I'm split. If we're preserving agricultural and all we're getting is alfalfa that gets shipped off to China, I don't think there's value to that in the community. But I do know of at least one property out there that have a lot of greenhouses, and they're actually producing produce that local people might actually eat. And so I think we have to be careful about the incentives that we place, because sometimes we have unintended consequences. And so I think we need to, I agree, I think we need to spend some time on this. I think we need to get some consensus and look into it, maybe put together a committee to study these issues.
So there was a committee, kind of, and Brian and I were on it, the Provo People's Lobby. And the outcome of that was to look at open space, ag space on the west side, and consider what maybe some other communities that already have policies in place are doing, and to try to find the money to either build development rights or whatever it is to facilitate that. But, you know, it's one thing to dream about it, it's another to say, this is where we're going to do it. This particular parcel is something that we're interested in, either because it's prime farmland, and I think there's a problem there. Some of the prime farmland doesn't necessarily have the best irrigation setup. So we have some difficulties to work out, but you have to just make a decision. What is it we want to do, and how are we going to get there?
My biggest challenge is the developers out there and the property owners seem to be at odds, and the property owner doesn't want his property developed until he gets the right price. And once that right price comes in, yeah, let's do it. And I'm just not sure that we're, as a council, unless the city is willing to actually come in and buy it and say, this is what we want. I struggle with a property owner not being able to sell his property at the right price or at what he wants. And so we need to decide as a community if we're willing to ante up, if we're willing to make that community on the west side. Our problem right now, our biggest problem in my mind, is the growth that we're going to be experiencing. And we've got to determine as a community whether we're willing to accept that growth. We can stop it and just say no more, which I don't believe in, or we will have to look at our plans and say, is this really what we're hoping for? We recognize that it is coming unless we do something. And I think that's something that we need some help with, from our constituents. I've heard several people say that I don't want Provo to change anymore. Well, I don't believe that's possible. And so I think that we need to step up and just say, okay, this is where growth is going to happen. Does our agricultural plans fit in with this? And we as a community, and as a council, as planning commission, as planners, need to just make those hard decisions.
Just a follow-up comment to that. One of the challenges is finding a financial vehicle, like you were talking about. There are some farmers that I think would like to preserve their land for agricultural uses, but the challenge is finding a mechanism to make that financially viable for them. And there are some things out there, grants and things, but we just haven't found the right vehicle yet to make that work.
Well, we also had back in May, an explanation that the Nature Conservancy District had allocated like $90,000, and I'm not quite sure what we're getting out of that right at the moment, but it seems like that was being directed towards studying and not actually purchasing anything. And if we don't have a plan, like you say, last year, by the time we do have a plan, there won't be anything left to actually save for any purpose other than residential.
And I worry as well that while we kind of wait to kind of develop this vision, things are happening already. And so not only are we going to get residential, but we'll get residential that may not lead us in the direction that we want to go.
An important component with this discussion, I don't think we spend enough time. It's one of the things that with planning commission has come up a couple of times, especially on the west side, is economic development. People on the west side frequently talk about a grocery store and things like that. And there was an opportunity a few years ago on Geneva and Center Street for a grocery store to come in. But that went away. The timing wasn't right. Since then, other grocery stores have come into the area. And even with our general plan, the density that it calls for now, if we go forward with that, it's fairly unlikely that we'll get a grocery store out on the west side. And so that's an important component that really hasn't been talked a lot about.
Just to complicate that issue, our capital improvement planning has been done at that 4 units to the acre mark because of the general plan language. If we start increasing that density in order to help get the grocery store, now we've got to rethink our capital improvement plans that call for our water lines, our sewer lines, our storm drain lines, and all of that. So it gets more complicated very quickly.
Is it really just rooftops that are required to bring you to a grocery store?
Well, at the end of the day, it's the available money in the area. And if you have higher disposable income, then often less rooftops can do it. If you have lower disposable income, you need more rooftops to get the formula for people to come in. And I know economic development's done work on that, but those are kind of guiding things when I hear people at one time say, well, we need to preserve agricultural land out here, and we want to have horse property and things like that. Like, okay, that's a good way to, that's sort of appropriate, reasonable direction for the community to go. And then I hear them say, and we need to get a grocery store. And then I say, well, I don't know if you can get both, because it just may not work. But that's part of it, is we need to, I think, a better understanding of exactly what we do need to get. And how much does that influence how we plan?
So on the west side, at one time, we did have enough rooftops because they wanted to build. Now, one could argue some of that has been siphoned off with Walmart or other places they can shop. They seem to be very protective. A lot of grocery chains on their formulas. If you ask them how many rooftops, you may not, or probably won't get an answer. We did talk to a developer just the other day, and he said that's pretty much the case, although admitted that there was some discussion of real numbers with. And if you can get that, it creates a goal like, well, we need X many rooftops. It's easier to plan when you know how many you really need, at least in the eyes of the potential developer of the shopping center.
Yeah, you have a goal, and that's part of this is retail, especially a grocery store on the west side, a high priority. And if that really is a high priority, that really drives a lot of assumptions like Bill was saying that, well, then what do we need to do to get that? What type of population do we have? And then that drives, well, what type of infrastructure do we need to have out there? Electrical, sewer, water, stormwater, which drives, whole, what does our road network need to be like? And so those are really high level important questions that need to be answered last year,
We're in the process of doing a neighborhood plan for the west side.
Yeah, we are doing.
Where are we at in that process, and what kind of feedback are you getting so far from those that are involved?
Feedback we're getting is very contradictory. Perhaps it would be a good idea for the city council to form a subcommittee to just work on some of these policy issues and bring forth recommendations to you, because they're just at odds with each other. We have been planning that engineering and planning have been thinking that everything south and west of the West Side Connector, Lakeview Parkway, would be agricultural land, because we just don't want to allow, for environmental reasons, we don't want to allow development below that or west of that. Is that adequate to satisfy those who are calling for preservation of agricultural land? I don't know that. To what extent do we have to play with population numbers to get the grocery store? It looks like if we just develop what is developable at 4 units the acre, it's a marginal number. But again, we really need to work with economic development, get a better understanding of that. So we've done a lot of the background work for the neighborhood plans for those 3 neighborhoods. But until we can figure out some of these policy directions, we don't know where to go from here. We need to get that policy direction.
We're now at a point it's really hard to come up with a firm recommendation because we're now at a point where we really could go 2 divergent ways, and we'll go into a meeting and there'll be people who are really no more growth, agriculture, that's all we want. And we'll hear from another group who's exactly the opposite. And both groups are very vocal, it's an important issue to them. And so for us to invest in a plan from here, to get to a plan where we'd really come to the council and say, here's our plan and recommendation, we almost need some guidance, because to do one or the other is going to take a lot of time and effort. And so we don't want to spend all this time and effort if it's really we need to be going this dramatically different direction. And that's it's a little bit of a chicken in the egg thing, because you need us to do some more work to be able to bring information to you to make good. So planning commission can make good recommendations, you can make good decisions, but where we focus our time and effort is what we're kind of struggling with now, and which direction do we go? So maybe some of these higher level things, as Bill suggested, a subcommittee of the council, and I know the West Side is in the council's top 10 list. Maybe a subcommittee that could try and figure out some of these high level things, just because if you do go, say, the direction of more population, it doesn't necessarily mean it's high density everywhere all the time. Maybe it's along certain corridors and certain nodes, and that's how you approach it. But that takes a lot of time and effort to do it, as opposed to just the time and effort to figure out which direction do we really go with this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and the feedback you're getting is that the agricultural land just south of the West Side Connector is not adequate from those that want agriculture. Is that what you're saying?
That's the feeling I'm getting, but I don't know if they've given us that feedback in any kind of unified way.
Okay. So there's a lot of agricultural, land that's really prime, but it's not on that side of the West Side Connector, so.
Right, you have a subdivision before you, rezoning for subdivision on tonight's agenda, that you're gonna have people, you'll hear from people in that neighborhood saying, no, we want to preserve agricultural land, don't do less than half-acre lots or third-acre lots.
Does half-acre, third-acre lots, does that preserve agricultural land?
Well, the county found that by taking their agricultural zone and letting you go from 40-acre lots down to 5-acre lots, that destroyed agriculture in the county. That even 5-acre lots destroyed agricultural production in the county. So doing lots that are 1 acre or less and think you're going to preserve agriculture, I don't think that's valid. I don't think that's correct.
And what is their goal with agriculture? Is it just to have open space? Because we don't have enough agriculture to actually.
With them, I think it's more, I think it's more that agricultural feel rather than agricultural production. I think that's what they mean.
Yeah, just open space and quiet nature.
Right.
Envision Utah's been working with Utah County and a lot of the cities in the county to come up with an agricultural toolbox to try and deal with agriculture generally in the county and by extension in Provo City. And a lot of the direction that they're going is to try and provide opportunities for agriculture to exist and operate, but yet when a owner or farmer or rancher wants to change and do something else, that there's opportunities for them to do that. And there are things that can be done if there's a desire for open space, for instance, the Spain conservation easement, where you can go in and buy development rights. And so a farmer is willing to do that, and they're not often their land is their 401k program. Or it's their inheritance that they want to eventually someday give to their kids, even if it doesn't develop. And so one of the things that we need to decide with this is when we say open space and agriculture, are we talking more Despain conservation easement type, where hopefully the Despain conservation easement stays open forever, and that's what happens with it? Or are we trying to accommodate agriculture until the underlying property owner wants to develop? And and even that decision is a dramatically different approach of how we do things. So if we want to make it forever, then that may impact what the city council budgets, and are we going to do that, and grants and different things that we would do as a city to approach it from that perspective.
I think the subcommittee is a good idea. I feel like we need those farmers, those owners that currently have agriculture as part of that committee. I mean, you need all those people to be a part of the decision-making process, right? I mean, just to see what their thoughts are, what they would like to see happen. Because for me, it's hard to go in and say, oh yeah, this is the plan for our city. Never mind that you have a nice farm here, And so that's where we need to have that. At least I'm speaking for myself. I need to have that kind of input from farmers, from those that live there, from how they want to see the city develop, from our citizens in general, but those that are actually living there. I want to hear what they would like to see. How do they want to see this area? And so that's why the neighborhood plan is really important to me. I want to hear what they would like to see happen in their neighborhoods, right? And in their
I think there's been views pretty much expressed. Bill's already alluded that we've got areas down there where there's just diametrically opposed views, and their neighbors, their family, some of them, their cousins, and they're fighting. Some cousins want to sell and get the money, other cousins want to farm. Yeah, brothers. So we're not. I mean, we have some of that information already from neighborhood meetings with development and from other areas. So having a committee and having these people come and express their opinion, I'm not sure we will get current information, but I don't think we'll get an answer. Does that make sense? We're gonna get.
I guess I don't feel like I have a good enough handle on, the majority of how they feel in those areas and what they would like to see happen. Because when they came in originally and said, we really need to preserve some of this farmland, well, that's great, but what how do the farmers feel about that? Do they want to?
It wasn't those people.
Yeah,
right.
And so I would like to know, I mean, it is their property. I would like to know what they would like to see for the future of their property too. I'd like to understand that.
So one of the best things before being on the council, I served on different committees, sometimes short-lived, sometimes longer ones. And one of the best things about that is I often came in with like one idea, and then by sitting on the committee, by researching these things, by having different presentations, I felt like my opinions would change, my views would change, and that was very helpful. I think there's times that we talked about it a little bit, people say, yeah, we want just agriculture, except we want a grocery store. And so sometimes these decisions have consequences that are not what are wanted. I've heard lots this past week, well, we need to keep the neighborhood, the feel of the neighborhood. And that's great, but sometimes these are people that bought up a farmer's, a developer bought a farmer's land, a field, turned it into houses, and people bought there, but now they don't want the field next to them to be bought and turned into houses. And so they say, we need to listen to the neighbors there. And it's like, well, which neighbors? Are we listening to the farmers who've been there for a long time? Are we listening to the people that are just kind of the first wave of that change? Or do we have any responsibility to the people that may be on the third wave in developing in a way that they're going to have a high quality of life even after it's fully developed or partly developed? And so who do we listen to? But if we have a committee where people that represent those different interests can come together and can research and realize, oh wait, if we actually do want a grocery store, we may need to change this, and by having that committee, it can be helpful on multiple levels.
You're never gonna get consensus, period. Are you, Gary?
No.
And so we just need to do what's best for the city. We can talk about this forever and ever, but we need to do what's best for the city and the majority of the residents. And the majority of the residents, I think, want development. If we took the majority and they would rather have a grocery store, then if they have to choose between the two. So we can talk about it forever, but I think the direction we're going now is the proper direction. I think that's the direction the majority of people are going, what's best for the city. You're never gonna get consensus. You can have all the committees you want, David, I'm sorry, but you're not gonna get consensus. We didn't get new information, but it's gonna be just as polarized as we've gotten in the past, I believe.
So, admittedly, we'll have differing opinions, and we do have people, whether it's in the same family or not, that have different opinions, but I think there is enough interest in the general public and a certain segment of the west side in trying to find some way to preserve some amount of open space or ag. Now, the question is where and how. And if we know that there are certain farmers that are still very much in favor of farming, we need to know who they are and where they have their property and see if that lines up with something that we also would agree that should stay green.
And are they willing to commit to that in perpetuity? That becomes the.
That's what I'm looking at, is are there people that are friendly to the cause? I know there's some that are just adamant, like, hey, it's our property rights, we're gonna develop this. But if there is someone out there, and there, I think there are, that are interested in staying green, let's know who they are and see if we can work with them.
Yeah, just a couple of things on that. I think that Mr. Stewart's correct in that past behavior is a good predictor of what's going to happen. And so far, we've built out. We've got that massive build out in the northwest around the high school. They've gone, things like that. So that seems to be the direction we've gone so far, and the direction we'll probably continue to go until we do something with stake in the ground. But at the same time, I agree that we need to hear from people that have the vested interest up front, otherwise we hear from them on the back end. But everybody wants to preserve agriculture and land rights and things like that and open space until it comes time to cash in their 401k. And then now we want development. Well, it's not like the city as a whole agreed to. So, well, we've got to listen to people who own the land and are farmers, agricultural people. What's best for the on the whole, what's reality, now and 30 years from now is absolutely something that's got to be taken into account. And it may not be preservation of sheep and farmland and things like that.
Appreciate the discussion.
A couple quick points. There's so many types of development. So when Mr. Stewart says, well, let's just let it all develop, but there's still so many unanswered questions. And if I lived on the west side, or if I had a lot of undeveloped area around me, I would hope that there would be an eye to trails and a quality of life development rather than, and I think the fears I hear on the west side is you're just going to throw in more homes. They're going to look exactly the same, and they're just going to be rows and rows and rows of homes exactly the same. And I think that the West End could develop in a beautiful way that would be a very high quality of life. But if you don't define that, that's where you're just going to get the developers coming in and throwing the developments at you. The second point I'd like to make, thank you to the Planning Commission members. I don't get to see you a lot either. I try to follow a tradition set by my predecessor of also not trying to influence your decisions and let you operate without me trying to dominate your thoughts. I'd like you to know that as I talk to people in the city and explain the process of the Planning Commission and the council, I frequently tell the city members, and I don't know if this is true or not, but this is my hope, is that the Planning Commission is a body that's free from some of the pressures that the council members are on. You're not up for election. You don't have people saying, well, I'm sorry I voted for you. And that does give you an ability to operate a little bit more. And it's usually what I tell people is this is a body that operates a little bit more the way things should be in a vacuum. And then when it comes over to the council, then there is a lot more political pressure, and sometimes decisions can be more political than they are with you. And to the extent we can preserve that for you, I would love to do that. I can't do this, but even the comments that you get in your meetings, I think, tend to make you more political and frequently don't represent the overall feeling of the community, because you just get the ones that are mad. So thanks for your service.
Just one kudo really quick, and I think that the planning department does a good job of bringing us back to earth frequently, as we do hear from the neighborhoods and those people that are there on an explosive, polarizing issue. It can tend to make us start to feel very neighborhood centric and very homeowner or very, small scale centric. And the planning department brings us back all the time and says we're looking at the high level, the good of the city, and we're talking about ordinances, we're talking about zoning, we're talking about, does this meet with the current plans that are in place and things like that? And if so, then it's our responsibility kind of to move forward or not, depending on those things. So they do a good job with that with us.
The council has the opportunity to look at the more subjective, to look at, what the real life experience of those living in the area. There's a balance between just trying to go by what the code says and also adding some subjective. I appreciate the discussion. We do need to go on to the next item, but before we do that, I would bring this forward to the council work session so that we can discuss what was been recommended as far as the subcommittee and some ways that we can help maybe provide some guidance for the rest of that and move that priority forward a little bit better. The other ones we've had quite a bit of movement on in that one, maybe not as much as some of the others, unless you're including dumping aviation and everything happening at the airport. We're doing quite a bit there, but as far as maybe giving some policy direction where we can, I look forward to hearing, from these neighborhood plans as well. But we will bring this forward to a work session and have this further discussion.
I would encourage you guys in that work session to make sure that when you meet with residents or have that committee formed, that those residents on the west side are, as Bill mentioned, well informed that there is some preservation there on the west side of the west side connector to preserve that. And is that sufficient, or is that not sufficient, or if you need to move to the east of that? How far east do we want to go and what's reasonable? Because my sense is a lot of residents aren't familiar with that or are aware of that idea to save some of that land. And I don't know, I mean, is that sufficient, or is more space needed for trails and parks? And are the residents even aware of that? Because oftentimes when they do show up at our meetings, they're not often as well versed about some of the issues that may be facing them or before them until they're, quote, educated about it in either the planning commission meeting or the city council meeting. So I think that may help them to make an informed decision that would then ultimately inform the council. Thank you.
So the next item of discussion is a discussion on the appointment procedures related to the planning commission. And Mr. Jones, if you would mind just taking a few minutes and
Sure.
explain.
I think this will be really brief, but there's been a fair amount of discussion recently over the past few weeks about the appointment process, and it's really kind of originated because of some record keeping or record tracking issues. And so we've implemented a couple of procedures with the appointment that's taking place tonight for some new for some new planning commission members. I just kind of wanted to walk through why we've done this. So as you're aware, under city ordinance, planning commission members are appointed by the mayor with the advice and consent of the council. They can be removed by the mayor under the bylaws of the planning commission, and they can also, by city ordinance, be removed by the majority vote of the council. In the meantime, during their term, their terms operate a little bit differently than the rest of the boards and commissions in the city. I don't know if you were aware of that or not, but the rest of the boards and commissions in the city, when they're appointed to a term, that an expiration date is stated, and when the expiration date comes, they're done. They're no longer on. The planning commission is a little bit interesting because there's actually a provision in city code that says even when the expiration date is reached, the members continue to serve until their successor is appointed. And that's led to a little bit of confusion because in our last
few resolutions where we've appointed, where the mayor has appointed and the council has consented to the appointment of planning commission members, we haven't been really specific about who's replacing who. And so we've thought a little bit about how to do that just to be more clear. So our records are clear and there's no question about it. So if you, not that you'd ever be technical enough to want to do this, but if you were to compare tonight's appointing resolution to previous resolutions, you'll see that we've actually divided it in half, and all of the other board and commission appointments happen in the first half, and the planning commission appointments are actually happening in a separate section of the resolution. And the reason why is specifically because there are different ordinances that govern those appointments. And what we've also done is actually assigned you seat numbers, so that we can actually keep track of who is replacing who, because when we appoint a new person, we'll appoint them to a certain seat. There isn't any priority about that. If you look at it and you have any questions, the way I arbitrarily came up with the seat numbers is the three currently serving members were assigned seat numbers in the order of their names appeared in the resolution when they were originally appointed, and the 4 that are being appointed tonight were assigned in alphabetical order by last name. So, so that's just how we put them on the chart. But there's no the seat numbers don't mean anything as far as having any kind of priority or seniority or anything. They just allow it to be very clear for both the commission members, the planning commission staff, council staff, and everyone else who might be concerned about it, to know exactly who is replacing who and which seats are vacant or empty. And so tonight there's a resolution going forward that will clarify that all 7 of the regular full seats are full, and that there aren't at this time any alternates, subject to that alternates being included at some future date. That was really all I wanted to kind of update on, but I'm happy to answer any questions if there were any. So. Mr. Connect?
Yes, question. So it states that the terms shall be staggered. Doesn't get explicit, but I would like to think that that's done so that you probably wouldn't be appointing the majority all at once,
right, like
we're currently doing with 4.
Yeah, it's a little bit interesting because of the fact that it's 3-year terms. A lot of times, for example, with the council members, what's much more common is for there to be 4-year terms. And then the way to do the staggering is very clear, because staggering is half in every 2 years, right? Which, to your point though about the majority, is every 4 years we do actually elect a majority of the council, because it's 4 and 3.
Right, but that
and
you have the option of 2 or 1 year, and it's been done in the past.
Right, and you certainly could do that. The current there are 3 current members whose terms don't expire until 2018, and under the assumption that the ordinance says that there's a 3-year term, the 4 being appointed tonight, the terms are for 2019. So
there's no staggering.
Well, there's staggering in the sense that it's 3 and 4, right. But there's not appointments taking place every year under the current proposal.
But in years past, we have had members come and go, that are appointed on off years, so to speak. So Ed Jones was one that comes to mind, that was added kind of not with 4 or 3. He was added.
Michael Brito.
What's that?
Michael Brito.
Correct.
And that's been, from going back and kind of reconstructing the appointments over the last 5 or 6 years, de facto staggering pretty much always happens, because it seems like it's almost kind of rare for the entire 7 members to all serve their full terms. So there have been a lot of interim appointments over the last 5 years.
We want to talk about how many alternates?
So I have a few questions I'd be interested in your feedback on. And this is just coming from a couple of items that we're discussing in the Council Rules Committee as possible ways to maybe improve the procedures. don't know if the Rules Committee is going to end up recommending any of these, and if they do, I don't know if the council will end up adopting any of them, but I thought this would be a good opportunity to get your feedback. So I'll mention 3 things, and just interested in your thoughts. First, this idea of that Mr. Jones mentioned, where the Planning Commission operates differently than most of our other boards in that members can keep serving until they're replaced. That makes it so that it's easy for the administration and the council to not really worry that much about being timely and getting the appointments replaced, because you kind of always got that as a fallback. So one possibility is, what if we change that so that it was like all the other boards, and so that the term expired when it expired, and that would put the onus on us. You know, we have to make sure we got the appointments done in a timely fashion, but if we had enough staggering, hopefully that wouldn't be too big of an issue. So that's one question for you. Second question, as we were looking at attendance and votes, we saw in various years, some years there'd be more than others, but where there some items may only have 4 votes, or in some cases even 3 or 5 or 6. And so the question came up about the chair voting. And I understand there's been a kind of a tradition for quite a few years now where the chair hasn't voted except to break a tie. And got to looking in that, and I suspect that probably comes from Robert's Rules, because I noticed that you have Robert's Rules established in your bylaws as a gap filler. You know, if something isn't explicit in code or in bylaws, then we fall back to Robert's Rules. And Robert's Rules actually does address that. It says the chair protects his impartial position by exercising his voting right only when his vote would affect the outcome, in which case he can either vote and thereby change the result, or he can abstain. So I think that's probably where that came from, but there's another section in there that says for small boards of less than a dozen or so, that's not really recommended. And so in that other section, it says in a board meeting where there are not more than about a dozen members present, some of the formality that's necessary in the largest assembly would hinder business. The rules governing such meetings are different from the rules that hold in other assembly in the following respects. And then the one that mentions the chair may speak in debate and vote on all questions. So that's another question for you. I think, again, we just barely started discussing this, so I don't know how other council members feel, but I prefer the more opinions, the better, from my perspective. So we're considering, and would like your input on putting some kind of a suggestion either in the bylaws or in the code that to encourage rather than discourage the chair for vote. Okay, so that's question number 2 for you. And then the last one has to do with alternates. We noticed they tend not to come as often. Mr. McGinn has been told us of cases where some have felt like maybe they weren't quite as important of a member because you couldn't vote unless somebody did come. So we were kind of kicking that around a little bit. And then there's actually Mr. McGinn that suggested kind of an interesting idea. I wanted to run by you. What if instead of 7 full members and 2 alternates, we had 9 full members, but kept the requirement for a quorum the same? So normally you think of a quorum as a majority, but it doesn't have to be. You know, it can be defined, so we can still define a quorum as 4. So you would have the same advantage of having alternates in terms of you have more people there in case of absences or recusals and things like that. But you wouldn't have this kind of 2-tier, you know, 2 different classifications of planning commission members. And then any planning commission members that came would be able to vote, whether it's 7, 8, or 9 that showed up. So those are the 3 questions that I'd be interested in your thoughts on.
And in line with that, I actually went back and looked at planning commission meetings starting at the beginning when I say the beginning, it's what I could find, August 2009. I made it up through May of 2012. May of 2012. That was 41 meetings, and 13 of those had 7 or more present, but the rest were short. And
Sure.
well, they were
Less than 7.
4, 5, 6, and only in 1 or 2 did I recognize an alternate. Very, very rare to see the alternate. It was pretty much the same old faithful people that showed up, but some of them couldn't make it, and so I have to remember, there's that rule that if you don't show up 3 times unexcused, you could be asked to be released. And I think that needs to be invoked in a timely manner if someone is not performing for whatever reason, because it handicaps the discussion and the function of the planning commission, in my opinion. And so we need to do a better job of monitoring that, and if alternates are not performing, or if anyone has a problem, we just need to try to address that and get back to full numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Connect and Mr. Sewell, for those comments. I think they're great, and I'll try to address at least 2 of them in no particular order. I think on your third point, we were suggesting to have 9 members and no alternates. I think, in thinking about that, I think there is some merit, because I think in my short time on there, we had 1 alternate who was very diligent in participating in the discussion and reading over the protocols and contributing to the discussion, but did not vote. And then that member, that alternate member, then was now appointed to the planning commission. But in my 3 years, 1 alternate member years ago, and I can't impute to know what he was thinking, did not show up regularly. Thus, I do think that, to your point, that perhaps if you have not had 3 excused absences, so they're unexcused, of course, and perhaps there might need to be a mechanism to have that person released from the planning commission. I do think there might be merit, though, in having 9 members, but still leaving the quorum at 4. When I was first put on, we did often have a full complement of planning commissioners present. And I don't know if that was when Brian was the chair or when Diane was the chair. But I know, at least in the last year, I don't know if the weather's just been nicer or what, but attendance has dropped. And oftentimes Alyssa Roth is sending out emails.
That's our secretary.
Please, she's not pulling teeth, but she is almost to the level of begging us to show. So I think having more members, but having the quorum be 4 or 5, I think would be useful, because that only further adds to the dialogue and gets different opinions. So I think that would be useful to consider. The other point about the chair, and I know when Diane Christensen was chair of the planning commission, she did vote.
I did as well.
And I didn't want to kind of, as planning commissioner, or the chair of the planning commission, didn't want to steer a conversation or direct a meeting in any particular way that may persuade or dissuade the commissioner from voting in a particular direction. So I saw my role as to more, to be well informed about the items on the agenda. And of course, I am and was until last week when we voted in a new chair. But to more steer the meeting and to make sure that everyone's voice was heard in a reasonable and timely manner, and that the commissioners had their chance to share their opinion. Now, I would always share my opinion and my ideas, but I usually did not vote. And I'm trying to think if in that year, I can't recall off the top of my head if there was an instance where my vote, or 1 vote, would have been a deciding factor. And I would imagine if that was the case, then my vote probably would have been recorded in that case to break a tie. And remind me of your first question again.
Let's see.
Sorry.
The one
Serving
term,
until replaced.
serving until replaced, and make it like the other boards.
Yeah, and my personal thought on that is I'm in favor of term limits, right? For, from the White House on down, and of course the White House does have them, but all the way on down. And I think that's probably true for most commissions and boards at the local level too. I would think that 2 terms would be sufficient. I know for me, the first year and a half on the planning commission, I scratched my head and what? What this we're doing, or I don't know what we're just local community members. Most of us aren't, we're not developers, one's an architect. We don't have degrees in city planning. So there is a learning curve. And now I finally have come to the point where I think, okay, I have a better sense of where I think, Vision 2030 is headed, an idea of how the city council works a little bit better, and how the planning commission works in concert with the city council. And I would think after 2 terms, I would be more than happy to say it's been lovely, it's been fun, educational. Hopefully I made reasonable decisions along the way. But I think to that end, it would be better to have more people involved, to get them invested in their city. I don't know if that helps you at all.
Just a quick clarification. We weren't talking about putting a limit on the number of terms. It was just that when you came to the end of the term, that would be the end. Because the current code says that you can continue to serve until replaced. So you could go weeks, months, or potentially even years beyond the end of your term and still
Specifically replace you.
Right.
If they replace somebody, they didn't specifically say this person.
Yeah, I see. And that's, I think, but they do go hand in hand. You could say, well, you serve 2 terms and this person will replace you and you will be replaced, versus just replacing an open seat or someone resigning or something else. I think, yeah, you could do it. I think you could do a hybrid of both.
Mr. Smith, and then we'll
Did
get
you want to
close.
go? You go first.
I would just follow after Ross that I think opening it up to 9 members instead of 7 and 2 alternates makes sense. One of the strengths of the Planning Commission is that we all have such different backgrounds and bring different perspectives to bear on the issues that we hear. And I think that just makes us better.
And I think it takes us time to figure out our differences of opinion.
Right.
Who's gonna, here comes the white fence comment, and here comes this comment, here comes that comment, and to understand where different commissioners, kind of their line of reasoning and their thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes us a while to figure out that dynamic amongst ourselves. But I agree that I don't see, or I'm hard pressed to see a downside of 9. I guess it's 2 more sandwiches that need to be purchased.
Well, we do need to close to get
I apologize.
prepared for notes, okay, to prepare for our next meeting, but we would just want to tell you how much we appreciate the work that you do. And I know it's, it is a lot of work, and it is a service that you're providing it for a lunch, right?
We enjoy it.
An occasional lunch,
We do enjoy
but
it.
just want you to know how much we appreciate what you do. And I read all of your report of action. I read through all of that, and it really helps me to know where the Planning Commission is on an issue. As I'm trying to put all the pieces together, that's a really important piece for me, and I know other council members are feel the same way. I just want to tell you thank you, and thank you for coming and meeting with us. It's so nice to get to know you a little bit more on a personal level in these sort of settings. So thank you. We need 15 minutes. We only have 5 to reset for our meeting. So
10 seconds.
Okay, 10 seconds.
The summary of actions are very helpful, and possibly even more helpful than the vote count is the discussion. Sometimes in those it has, these are points that were discussed. I don't know who takes your minutes, but knowing the reasoning behind your vote to me is as helpful or more helpful than the vote itself.
True. Good addition. Thank you. All right, so we'll look for a motion to adjourn then. Thank you, Mr. Winter. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Cox. All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.